Well, a couple things. First of all, I think in the context of our broader foreign policy, we need to recognize that there are countries, for example, whose governance systems are not the ones we would want for our own country, but nonetheless, we need to have a relationship with them because it's in our geopolitical interests. Two countries I recently visited, Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Saudi Arabia is not a democratic society, but yet they're an important strategic partner for us in the Middle East for a variety of reasons. On the other hand, you see where there are opportunities, and you would hope to be able to support a vibrant democracy development in places in our hemisphere, as an example. And I think what that draws to bear is that what democracy promotion or programs like this mean will vary from region to region and country to country. I think we all wish we lived in a Pollyanna world where everything was equal across the board, but the fact of the matter is that foreign policy has never looked like that. We have always had to treat different countries in different ways, sometimes because our geopolitical interests require it. That said, I think it's also important in these programs, just because a program, and I'm not criticizing any program in particular, but just because a program has a nice and impressive title, democracy promotion, well, I think we would all be supportive of democracy promotion. But at some point, these programs have to prove that they are actually promoting democracy.
Welcome back to Right View Nation, where the truth has no filter and the American spirit never bows to globalist nonsense. Today, we're diving into a Senate hearing exchange that says everything about where we are and where we should be going when it comes to defending freedom, not just here at home, but across the globe. We just watched a powerful moment where Congressman Díaz-Balart grilled Secretary Rubio on the Biden administration's so-called plans to support democracy and freedom abroad. And folks, let me tell you, what we heard should light a fire under every patriot in this country. Let's start with Díaz-Balart's opening. He nailed it. Under this administration, we've watched democracy programs, which were once bipartisan tools to advance American values, get hijacked by woke ideologues. Instead of focusing on freedom, sovereignty, and strength, these programs have been twisted into progressive pet projects wrapped in diversity quotas, DI mandates, and leftist NGO contracts that do absolutely nothing to advance liberty overseas. This isn't foreign policy. This is foreign virtue signaling at its worst. Now here's the kicker. Rubio, to his credit, didn't sugarcoat a thing. He admitted the hard truth that sometimes we've got to work with regimes that don't mirror our values, countries like Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Guess what? He's right. Because foreign policy isn't about handing out friendship bracelets. It's about protecting American interests. You don't go into a hostile world waving rainbow flags and hoping tyrants turn into Jeffersonian Democrats. You go in with leverage, with strategy, and with backbone. Rubio also made a solid point that needs to be shouted from every rooftop in Washington. If you've been pumping taxpayer money into democracy promotion programs for 20 years in some failed state, and there's still no democracy, then maybe it's time to stop writing blank checks to these globalist nonprofits that produce nothing but reports and PowerPoint presentations. How about we stop funding fraud and start funding freedom? Rubio even referenced Syria. Yes, Syria. A war-torn nation under the grip of extremists and shady power brokers. But even there, he sees the possibility of creating a government inclusive of Alawites, Sunnis, Druze, Kurds, and Christians. Not as a fantasy, but as a strategic project worth considering if, and only if it actually advances stability and American security. That's the kind of realpolitik thinking we need. Not more empty speeches about gender equity workshops in Kabul while the Taliban whips women in the streets. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, Iran.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Members, I will call on members based on seniority of those present when the hearing was called to order, obviously going between side to side. Each member will have 5 minutes for questions and the responses, and I anticipate that we'll have enough potentially time for maybe 2 rounds. We do have a hard stop at 4 o'clock. I will start, Mr. Secretary. You know more than most the plight of the oppressed and the fragility of freedom. And I think democracy programs, when potentially done right, without an extreme policy agenda, woke agenda, agenda du jour, can be a valuable national security tool to advance our safety, our security, and frankly, our values abroad. And so now, while the skinny budget, and we understand why, doesn't address democracy programs, but a lot of these awards were terminated during the assistance review. Now, I will tell you, Mr. Secretary, I had sadly a front row seat to the Biden administration's effort to co-opt important bipartisan programs to advance their woke agenda while damaging our national security. And by the way, democracy programs were a big part of that. So I get it. But we need to get back into basics and get back into the game in the right way. So what can you tell me about your plans and then the president's plans and policies to support freedom around the globe, and what are your plans as far as potentially for democracy? Is that a priority? Democracy programs. So give me your read on that.
Well, a couple things. First of all, I think in the context of our broader foreign policy, we need to recognize that there are countries, for example, whose governance systems are not the ones we would want for our own country, but nonetheless, we need to have a relationship with them because it's in our geopolitical interests. Two countries I recently visited, Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Saudi Arabia is not a democratic society, but yet they're an important strategic partner for us in the Middle East for a variety of reasons. On the other hand, you see where there are opportunities, and you would hope to be able to support a vibrant democracy development in places in our hemisphere, as an example. And I think what that draws to bear is that what democracy promotion or programs like this mean will vary from region to region and country to country. I think we all wish we lived in a Pollyanna world where everything was equal across the board, but the fact of the matter is that foreign policy has never looked like that. We have always had to treat different countries in different ways, sometimes because our geopolitical interests require it. That said, I think it's also important in these programs, just because a program, and I'm not criticizing any program in particular, but just because a program has a nice and impressive title, democracy promotion, well, I think we would all be supportive of democracy promotion. But at some point, these programs have to prove that they are actually promoting democracy, that they are actually delivering on an outcome. And so, again, I'm not speaking about any program in particular, but when you've been promoting democracy in some society for 20 years and have made no advances, you have to ask yourself, at least at a minimum, you have to ask yourself, are we spending the money on the right thing? Is it with the right people and in the right way? And so I do think that these things are worthy of review, but ultimately, if we see opportunities that fit our national interest, to promote democracy, to promote pluralism in a society, I keep going back to this because it's very recent, but you would hope one day, for example, that we would be able to promote, if possible, and whatever efforts we can do, a society in Syria, which right now is under a transitional authority run by some people that I know have some difficult pasts, but nonetheless have expressed a desire at a national project, meaning they want to build a country. They're not interested in fighting a war with Israel. They're not interested in exporting revolution or becoming a playground for jihadists. And in order to have a real functioning society in Syria, you're going to have a government that's inclusive of Alawis and Druze and Sunni, some elements of Shia and Kurds and Christians. And if we can help somehow in bringing that together, we'd be open to doing it, but it's got to be a program that actually has a chance to succeed, not just some NGO with a nice title and they pitch us a contract.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Very little time, and I'm going to keep myself to the clock as well, Mr. Secretary. I may cut you off at the end of your answer. So very briefly, look, one of the flaws, I think, during President Obama's Iran JCPOA was that it did not cover Iran's ballistic missiles, their support for for terrorists and proxies. Can you give us an idea? And again, I don't have a lot of time, and I'm going to cut you off, so just know that. A little bit about those talks with Iran.
Well, again, I can't say as much because, when you're in the middle of a negotiation, you don't want to imperil it. Suffice it to say that the president and his entire team has been very clear. Iran cannot have an enrichment capability because that ultimately makes them a threshold of nuclear power. And there are sanctions related to terrorism, sanctions related to their ballistic missiles program and the like. Those sanctions, if they're not part of the deal, they'll remain in place if those things are not addressed. But the enrichment piece is the key piece. And we continue to say that Iran cannot have an enrichment capability.
Thank you. And members, you see that the chairman stuck to the clock. I am going to demand that everybody else does the same thing.
Rubio made it crystal clear that the United States must never allow Iran to enrich uranium. Period. No wiggle room. No backdoor deals. No Obama-style giveaways where we pretend Iran is a misunderstood victim while they chant death to America and fund Hezbollah terrorists. We need to remember, Iran is not just a regional actor. It's the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. They don't want peace. They want nukes. And under Biden's team of appeasers, they just might get them. Rubio said it best. If Iran doesn't address its missile programs, its terrorism network, and its nuclear ambitions, then sanctions stay on. And frankly, they should stay on forever until the Ayatollah's regime collapses under its own corruption. So here's where we're at. Rubio's stance is measured but firm. Díaz-Balart is sounding the alarm. And Biden's asleep at the wheel while his administration pushes ideology over strategy in every corner of the world. This administration doesn't want to spread freedom. It wants to spread wokeness disguised as diplomacy. And it's costing us. In influence, in credibility, in national security. Here at Right View Nation, we believe the role of the United States on the world stage should be clear and unapologetic. Stand by our allies. Crush our enemies. Promote freedom, not fantasy. And stop funding failures dressed up as activism. This isn't just about diplomacy. This is about the soul of American leadership. And it's time for the grown-ups to take the wheel again, before it's too late. If you agree, don't stay silent. Smash that like button. Subscribe to Right View Nation. And drop a comment below. Should we keep sending taxpayer money to democracy programs that deliver nothing? Together, we'll keep the pressure on. We'll call out the globalist con men. And we'll keep fighting for a world where American values, real values, lead the way. This is Right View Nation. No apologies. No retreat.